Good morning. My name is Bret Newbury. I am one of a team of worship associates that assists our minister, Reverend Susan Suchocki Brown, and our director of Lifespan Ministries, Kirsten Hunter, in bringing these services to us every week. We also enjoy the wonderful music offerings of Joanne Connolly, who will talk about the music for this week right now.
Good morning, everyone. So glad to be with you this morning. And I'm so amazed by our search team who is re-upping to really go the full way with us. So thank you, Alice, for being here with us this morning. To support what they're doing, we're doing some hymns they've chosen, Building a New Way, and Love Will Guide Us. And the wonderful Susan Adams has chosen some beautiful piano pieces as interludes. So enjoy the service. And what else, Bret?
Well, as Joanne was mentioning, the search committee is offering the sermon this week. Right now, for this greeting, they are represented by Alice O'Trainer. Alice, would you like to introduce what the search committee is talking about this week?
Thank you, Bret. Yes, our search committee is really looking forward to sharing more about our process, what we learned from the congregation and our candidates, why we don't have a candidate to present to the congregation, and what the future holds. Just a quick note about the cover photo that many of you saw that has the long hands extended. Kudos to the Murdach family who put these hands together so that we could warmly greet each of our candidates when they came for pre-candidating. I hope you enjoy the service, and we will be in the social hour afterwards to answer any questions you might have. Thank you. Bret?
And thank you to Alice and to the entire search committee for all your hard work and for your hard work into the future. I would also like to thank Jen Leiden for her work in editing this video so that we could have a wonderful church service for everybody to see this morning. And thank everybody that contributes to the wholeness and work of our church. Now, on to our services.
Yeah.
Spring has sprung, and it's time to celebrate at the Fellowship Associates' Spring Gatherings. Reconnect with South Church folks and make new friends at small outdoor gatherings. Guests will wear masks when not eating or drinking, bring their own food and drink and chair, and remain socially distant. Events will take place mid-May through June. For dates, times, and locations, check your Sunday morning email for the Spring Gathering Sign Up Genius link. Don't miss the fun after this very long winter. The South Church Spiritual Book Group is hosting a discussion of The Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi Coates on Wednesday, May 12th at 7 p.m. All are welcome. Please contact southchurchbookgroup@gmail.com for the Zoom link. And sometimes a piece of history is just a blank slate. Quarried in wells and transported as ship ballast for the construction of South Church in 1826, the slates from our roof have seen a lot of history and have great potential for second lives. Charcuterie boards, chalk slates, canvases, house signs, clocks. What will you do with your piece of local history? Available for a donation of $20 or more each, slates from the roof will be sold on Sundays from 1 to 3 p.m. on the portico. If you would like to volunteer to help with some slate sales, or have questions, or are interested in purchasing some slates, please contact Lori Bilby at turningtide@comcast.net.
Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. Hold my hand while I run this race. Hold my hand while I run this race. Hold my hand while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. Search my heart while I run this race. Search my heart while I run this race. Search my heart while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain.
Good morning once again. Have you ever had something you planned not turn out the way you expected? I mean, it happens, right? Sometimes it's something small, simple, inconsequential. Sometimes it's something big, something that's going to have a lasting impact. College was one of those lasting impact things for me. I had applied to several big-name schools, with my first three choices being fairly prestigious. I ended up not getting into my first three choices, but I still got into a well-known engineering school, my fourth choice. I enrolled and spent 2 years there. Not having the experience and knowledge of what different schools were like, I had no idea how bad the fit was for me. I managed to get through 2 years there, but I got increasingly depressed. Near the end of my second year, I had gotten to the point that I was not sure I was even going to finish college. The final nail in my big-name college career had been hammered in when I could not enroll in classes for the next semester because my advisor had gone on sabbatical. There was no one assigned as his replacement to sign off on my class schedule. The school was so big and so impersonal, there was simply no one to help me. I finished out that semester and planned not to return. I was left adrift, not knowing what I was going to do. I ended up taking a semester off and then got my act together and applied to the University of Maine. It turned out that the big-name school wasn't fully accredited, so I was nearly starting over at UMaine. The big-name school, it had been resting on its reputation for many years, so when I transferred to the University of Maine, I had to retake many classes. Retaking classes certainly made part of my new college experience easier. It also gave me a chance to make an apples-to-apples comparison between the schools. I was amazed at how much smaller the engineering classes were, 20 to 25 students per class at the University of Maine versus 400 to 600 students per class at the big-name school. I was so much happier, and with in-state tuition, my 3.5 years at UMaine was less expensive than 1 more year at the big-name school. So what did I learn? If I could go back and talk to my 18-year-old self, I would tell him that big decisions are just that, big. It can be hard to realize that none of the choices you have in front of you represent the path you want to take. It can be really hard to make the decision not to take any of the paths presented, because none of them are actually good fits. Sometimes choosing none of the above is the correct choice for you. It can be uncomfortable, feeling that you are putting things on hold to find a better option, but that can be much better than making a decision that just doesn't work. I have learned that big decisions require lots of thought, and sometimes you need to look for new options. And I try to give grace to those who I see making big decisions, who sometimes need to make that same choice and choose none of the above and go back and start over to try to find a new decision to make. I hope you all will think of that going forward as we progress through the next year.
The South Church Search Committee Chalice will be lit in the sanctuary this morning by Search Committee members Jim Verschueren and Charlie Murdach. We light our chalice with these words from former First Lady of the United States, Michelle Obama. For me, becoming isn't about arriving somewhere or achieving a certain aim. I see it instead as a forward motion, a means of evolving, a way to reach continuously towards a better self. The journey doesn't end.
I invite you to recite the mission statement with me, as shown on your screen. At South Church, we nurture spiritual growth through worship, learning, and community. We celebrate the worth and dignity of all people, and we inspire one another to act on our faith in the larger community.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, this world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry.
Good morning, everyone. You can probably tell that we really like plants at my house. Here I have some sunflowers that I planted, and they're going to go outside when it gets a little warmer. Over here we've got some tomatoes and some eggplants and some basil and some other veggies that are just growing a little bit before they can go outside. But today's story takes place in a garden plot. It's a plot in a community garden, and it's a plot that has no gardener. One spring, no gardener came to rent this plot. No gardener came to put plants there. All the plots around it had gardeners, and they had rows of plants growing, and they had fences, and they had trellises, but this plot had nothing. Well, that's not really true, because this plot had earthworms. Brown, wiggly worms down in the dirt, doing the things that earthworms do, eating and pooping and aerating the soil. As the worms burrow down, they make holes that get filled with air, and the air and the sun and the water and the compost left by the previous gardener are what feed that garden. Well, the worms were concerned that no gardener had come along, and they wished that a gardener was there working. They looked at the other plots and they saw flying things like bees and butterflies, and they thought, oh, if we had flying things like that, we could attract a gardener to our plot. But they didn't know how they could get those flying things to come there without flowers. One day one of the worms was sitting near the edge of the plot, and there was a big weed growing up nearby, and he noticed that there was a big yellow and black caterpillar inching its way up the stem of that plant. And then it worked its way across one of the leaves, and it just hung from the bottom of the leaf. And as the worm watched, the caterpillar disappeared into a shell, a green shell that hung there from the bottom of the leaf. The worm went to get some of his friends, and they came and saw it, and they watched it. Nothing seemed to be happening, and they gave up and they left. But every day they would come back, and they would check to see if anything was happening, but nothing was happening. Until finally, one day, as they watched, that green casing turned clear, and they could see color inside, and then it started to break open, and something was flapping its wings, and out flew a butterfly. And the worm said, oh, if we could change ourselves into butterflies, then maybe we could attract a gardener to come to our plot. Well, they didn't have any way to make a chrysalis like that for themselves, but they knew a centipede who could knit. Now, have you ever seen anybody knit on their arms? They use their arms like knitting needles. Well, the centipede could do that. And so she agreed to knit them a chrysalis. And she crawled up the stem of that plant with it and out onto the leaf, and she hung the chrysalis from the bottom of the leaf. Now the earthworms started discussing and arguing about who was going to go into that chrysalis and become something else. After a long time of arguing, one of the worms just decided that he was going, and so he inched his way up the stem and across that leaf and wiggled his way into the chrysalis. And a couple of other worms saw him, and not to be left behind, they went up the stem, over the leaf, and down into that chrysalis. And again that happened, and pretty soon there were 7 earthworms all jammed together inside that chrysalis, and it wouldn't hold any more. And so they all wiggled themselves together in there to wait. They waited. And while they waited, they wondered, what would they become? Would they become a flying creature with bold, beautiful wings like a butterfly? Would they become a creature with little tiny wings like a bee? Would they have the beautiful, iridescent wings of a dragonfly? What were they going to become? And then they wondered about the gardener that they would attract. What type of gardener would that be? Would it be someone who would plant things in nice, neat rows? Would it be a gardener who would put in supports for the plants, or one that would just let them grow all over the ground? Would the gardener put in a bench to let people come and sit near the garden? They wondered a lot about their becoming. Well, the chrysalis hung there in the sun and in the rain and in the wind, and eventually it started to unravel. And the wind caught a hold of the end of that yarn and pulled it, and it all unraveled, and then out came 7 brown, wiggly earthworms, fell to the ground. And they looked around their plot, and they saw there was still no gardener there. They wiggled themselves down into the dirt, and they found that the garden was becoming something while they were away. The other earthworms had been busily eating and pooping and aerating the soil, and there had been some plants left over from before that started to come back. There were seeds in the compost that the other gardener had put there that were starting to sprout. There were seeds that some birds had dropped that were starting to grow. It was starting to become a garden. Kind of wild, kind of messy, but a garden nonetheless. And the worms thought, well, maybe it's okay that we don't have a gardener for now. Maybe if the garden grows with some flowers and some veggies, a gardener might come along. I think that next spring, a gardener is going to come along to plant there. Because a good gardener is going to recognize that that soil is ready to be planted. Well, that's the story of our South Church garden. We're just all those earthworms getting that soil ready. Looking forward to when we can be together at that garden again.
Now is the time we set aside to share our treasure in the hope of maintaining and growing our South Church community. This month, our shared plate donations will be shared with the Lovering Health Center. In a moment, you will see a video describing the work they do. Contributions may be mailed to our Court Street address or may be sent via the internet from our webpage. Further instructions will be shown after the Lovering Health Center video.
Tucked away in a quaint neighborhood just outside of Portsmouth lives a reproductive and sexual health center that has been providing affordable and inclusive health care for the past 40 years. That place is the Lovering Health Center. Formerly known as the Feminist Health Center of Portsmouth, the Lovering Health Center opened its doors in downtown Portsmouth in 1980, providing abortion care for the first time in the Seacoast region of New Hampshire. Since 1987, we have lived happily in Greenland on a remote piece of property with a private parking lot and ample space away from anti-choice hecklers. Since then, our building, team, and services have continued to grow and evolve. We provide a variety of services, such as abortion care, which includes medication and the in-clinic procedure, contraceptive services, STI testing and treatment, HIV testing, preventative HIV medication known as PrEP, gender-affirming hormone therapy for transgender and gender-diverse folks, gynecological services, and more. In our commitment to accessibility, we offer an income-based sliding scale for people without insurance. We also offer telehealth appointments, which has been extremely helpful for patients who have difficulty getting to the health center for their care. We operate on a small and passionate team that is dedicated to providing high-quality reproductive and sexual health care. As an independent nonprofit health center, our goal is to provide services that are comprehensive and accessible. We want our patients to leave our center feeling fulfilled, empowered, and knowledgeable about their healthcare choices. Our entire mission is rooted in the feminist ideal of informed choice and bodily autonomy. We are an LGBTQ+ and anti-racist establishment. Our relationship with our community is a two-way street. We rely on them for their continuous and generous support, and they rely on us to provide essential and specialized services.
Thank you, South Church. We're so grateful to be the recipient of your shared plate for this very month, because the month of May, we're facing a state budget that's going to make significant cuts to family planning funding. We rely on that funding to give affordable care to our lowest income patients. So a donation this month is going to make a real impact on our ability to continue to give personalized, compassionate, reproductive and sexual health care to our Seacoast neighbors.
I feel really lucky to have been able to work for 35 years in a job that I still love. And your donation will help us to remain independent and flexible so that we can continue to provide client-centered care to our clients and not be governed by insurance companies or governmental policies. Thank you.
Over the past decade, 2 out of 3 independent reproductive health centers like the Lovering have closed their doors. It's because of the support of this community that we're here in this building today offering the compassionate reproductive health care that we do. As a small nonprofit, we strive to be responsive and adaptive to the needs of our Seacoast community. And it's generosity like yours that enables us to do that.
for this precious day, for this precious day. We're all gathered here, we're all gathered here, and those far away, and those far away. For this time we share, for this time we share, with love and care, with love and care. We give thanks, oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for this precious day.
Today, I am holding in my prayers all those who volunteer at South Church. It's amazing when we think about all the people who give so generously of their time and talents, all those who have worship as their responsibility and give generously of their thoughts. The search committee that worked so hard this past year, gathering information, taking time to think about who South Church is, what it is that makes South Church special, and looking for leadership that fits like it belongs here. For those who are part of shared ministry, who are actively looking for new recruits for the associate programs, for the fellowship persons who gather and find ways for people to be together at coffee hour and at social times, and for new members, for those who make the church so beautiful. The spring decorations down there this time of year were just outstanding. For those who give to make sure that the church runs smoothly, those who volunteer their financial talents, those who serve on the board, those who give hours and hours of time to make South Church be the wonderful place that it is. We are so incredibly fortunate with the number of volunteers in all ways that I've named and not named. Committee on Ministry, shared small group ministry, those who deliver and pick up and talk to and send cards, those who care, those who reach out. What an amazing community we are. And it happens because of the love for one another, the care for one another, the desire to make this be a community in which we can grow and thrive and live. So I offer thanks in this prayerful time for all those who volunteer. May you know that you are much, much appreciated. May it be so. Please take a moment, and if you have any prayer concerns, if you have any losses, do you have any joys, anything that you want us to know about, take a moment during the prayerful reflection, meditation, music, to just jot them in the chat so that we can hold you and be in touch with you. Know that you are loved and cared for. Amen.
When I opened up the settlement handbook during the first meeting of our search committee in the autumn of 2019, I knew I had gotten more than I had bargained for. The Unitarian Universalist Association had put together a beautiful, sprawling description of what a ministerial search should look like, and the gravity of the task ahead of us started to take shape in my mind. This was going to be a lot. When the world came to a grinding, pandemic-induced halt a little over a year ago, just as we were about to get to the parts of the search process wherein we were tasked with discerning the will of the congregation, it appeared perhaps we were dealt a hand that was more than we could handle. How could we move forward, we asked ourselves and each other, in this new environment, seemingly cut off from each other and our community? Was it even prudent to move forward with the search? As it turned out, the principles of our faith were the most effective guide. We embarked upon a free and independent search for truth and meaning, building a covenant for our team that was based around extreme intentionality, considering each decision with full hearts, open ears, inquiring minds. This commitment to continual discernment helped us to navigate the process, change course when necessary, and establish waypoints along our journey. As our church governance structure changed, we considered and incorporated modifications to the UUA guidance for search and included Kirsten in our conversations, crafting thoughtful covenants to guide our collaboration. When we invited our pre-candidates to journey to Portsmouth, we again built covenants to maximize safety, respect, and dignity for all of us in the process. We didn't get everything right, but through our discernment, we learned so much about South Church, our history, our community, and we began to see glimmers of what our future could be. By fully engaging with this process and the principles of our faith, we have engaged in a form of meaning-making that only extreme intentionality can bring when combined with committed and thoughtful collaboration. It feels like a holy task, a sort of divine midwifery, helping to bring new life to our beloved congregation.
Peter Block says, every time we gather becomes a model of the future we are trying to create. With our commitment to extreme intentionality, we seek to frame each of our committee meetings in a way that reflects who we are and who we can become as a congregation, as a practice of living the future we are trying to create. Finding the right minister for South Church requires that we understand a few basic questions about who we are, how we operate, and what changes are needed to make our future a reality. Which qualities do we think are the most important in a settled minister? What do we need and want in a minister, now and in the future? While the questions are basic, getting at the answers took some doing. The congregational survey and summary of cottage meetings, which combined involved over 300 South Church community members, gave us concrete data to help offer answers. For example, the majority want a minister who can be a spiritual leader first. We want a minister who prepares and leads inspiring and challenging worship services and celebrations, chooses sermon topics that focus on social justice issues, theological values, and spiritual growth, family life, relationships, and values. We also want a minister who creates a sense of belonging and builds community. Additionally, we grounded our work in the understanding that South Church is at the forefront of developing new ways of governing. Through focus group meetings, additional survey questions of associate program members, and conversations with Kirsten and Reverend Susan, we collected more data to inform our discernment process. We have learned a lot and are confident that with the foundation of information we have built, we are well equipped with the knowledge we need to find our next minister. As is said in yogic philosophy, what you seek is also seeking you.
We learned that our congregation has fared much better than most through this pandemic. We've thrived, raising funds to repair our roof, meeting our budget goals, and working on new church systems at the same time. This was not lost on our candidates. We learned that we live in a very attractive community for most ministers, but that they are also a bit daunted by the high cost of housing in our area. We learned that we're very attractive as a congregation. Candidates marveled at the strength of our associate programs, and more than one shared that they had planned to apply to South Church whenever we went into search. Another senior minister called us one of the UUA's flagship congregations. We learned that our UUA faith has a very bright future. 12 of our 22 candidates were brand new ministers. While not ready for a congregation of our size, there were many bright lights among them that we hope will cross our paths in the future. And from our candidates, one minister told us when we mentioned that we hope to continue with one service rather than two, that wanting to be all together was a sure sign of a congregation that didn't want to grow numerically, which this minister found troubling when our UUA message of inclusion is so needed in today's world. While talking about the importance of music, another minister told us of a UU colleague who led his congregation in singing Home, Home on the Range, because he believes so strongly in the importance of having members of a congregation raise their voices together, preferably without a hymnal, and singing out with joy. One candidate converted to Judaism while remaining a highly respected UU minister. They shared that our UU faith is truly big enough to allow any of us to embrace such a commitment. I love that. From discussions about our collaborative governance, we gained a deeper understanding of the philosophical and theological foundations for moving away from a CEO model, and how this fits with the anti-oppression work that our faith is engaged in. All good lessons taken to heart.
And yet, how can it be that only one candidate could be recommended wholeheartedly by the search committee? The experience begs two questions. First, is there something wrong with our congregation? Consider this. Our 22 applicants, about 40% of the searching ministers, were the most for any congregation. 2 of our final 3 are UUA superstars. We consistently heard from candidates how appealing we are and how impressive our strengths and achievements are. Some in our congregation speculate that we have a reputation as a difficult congregation. If that perception is out there, our experience in the search is that the positive image clearly tips the balance in our favor. One caveat. Our history of difficult ministerial transitions is long and varied and is part of how we are perceived. That history calls for a future congregational conversation. 2, did we miss the mark as a search committee? We deliberated deeply at each decision point along the way. We came to consensus each time. We have no reservations about the ultimate decision to select only one. In our post-decision interview with our preferred candidate, we heard how some of our actions gave him pause along the way. Because of our move toward collaborative governance, we included Kirsten in the pre-candidating weekend process, and with his permission, shared his ministerial record with her. UUA guidelines exclude other church members from contact with candidates. We were the only church to conduct in-person weekends in the midst of the pandemic. Our explanations of the collaborative governance model shifted over time. We handled the salary discussion less effectively than his other two preferred churches. He assured us that none of these things alone were deal breakers. All four of these considerations help us assess how we can improve our message and our process next year. Yes, next year. Very few ministers and few churches entered the second round. We had just one applicant, a not yet fellowshipped candidate. Our first choice has accepted a call to a congregation twice our size at a substantially higher salary with an impressive track record of social justice action. We wish him well. And now, Stephen, you have some particular thoughts to add.
Thank you, Jim. It is my belief that ministers do not choose their vocation because they think they will get rich. I do believe ministers expect to be paid fairly and equitably, which is what anyone should expect. The UUA issues guidelines for churches and ministers. These guidelines are based on church size and geographic location. South Church is classified as a GO3, and we are a mid to large-sized church. The UUA only uses wage data when they consider which GO number should be assigned to each congregation. Under this rating, the midpoint salary for a settled minister for South Church is $101,700. During pre-candidating weekends, salary, benefits, and housing were discussed. As candidates had this information in advance, there was little discussion on these points. If our top candidate had chosen South Church as their first choice, we would have entered into negotiations with that candidate to finalize a contract. We may never know the real reason why we were not the first choice of our top candidate. However, in a follow-up discussion, salary was one of the points on their list. Therefore, I am suggesting that in our 2022 budget, we increase the range for the minister's salary to a GO4 level. This would be an increase to $107,800 and would add $7,000 to the total ministerial package. Thank you.
Thanks for that important information, Stephen. South Church is a very special congregation. We don't gather because we've figured out life's questions or think that we've got it right. We gather to learn about being human. And sometimes it's not easy. Maybe that's why this chapter in our ministerial search is so hard. We are faced with looking back at the important information we learned from the cottage meetings, the surveys, the small focus groups, and the candidates. We'll examine the feedback that we've been given, and maybe, just maybe, we'll realize that everything has worked out just the way it is supposed to. We, as a congregation, are entering a time we are all given the opportunity to slow down, to learn about our gifts, to dive into our character, and restructure our beloved community while slowly and consciously coming back together in person. Our interim period has been unique. Upheaval, a rocky start, and a global pandemic. As a congregation, we have not been able to sit in the same room to discuss many of the challenges holding us back so that we may move forward. Our congregation is at the forefront of church governance. We're striving to be more democratic, anti-oppressive, and less patriarchal. And it's not for everybody. We're working out our administrative structures to be more collaborative, more clear, more transparent, and yet still accountable. We envision a sturdier church, one that may provide a model for other UU churches across the country. And we'll need a very special minister to do that. Not only willing, but eager to work on these issues with us. A person able to navigate creative chaos. We are lucky to have Reverend Susan Suchocki Brown with us during this time. As an accomplished and experienced minister, she will guide us and allow us to make a decision in the best interest of our beloved congregation. How we got here, where we are going, with your unwavering support, is truly for the best. The actress Marilyn Monroe defines this search process spot on for South Church. I'm selfish, impatient, a little insecure. I make mistakes. I'm out of control, and at times hard to handle. But if you can't handle me at my worst, then you sure as hell don't deserve me at my best.
We stand here together at the precipice that divides who we have always been and who we are about to become. We wonder, what does it mean to be the people of South Church? This beacon of light for liberal religion on the seacoast and perhaps the wider world. What does fate hold for us in the years ahead? And who will join to help guide us on our journey? There is no fret or fear in this wondering, for we know that our love and our faith will guide us through this long night of discernment. May it be so.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night.
As we close today, pretend that you are reaching out and taking the hand of someone in the pew next to you, in front of you, or behind you. Blessed is the ground, even when it is mud. Blessed is the seed in which we put our blind faith. Blessed is the weed that persists even in the hardest of times. Blessed is the worm that isn't afraid to do the dirty work. Truly blessed is the gift that you will become, even if it is only a wiser, happier worm. May we go forth and bless the world.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.